The morning sun peeked through the faded curtains of Eleanor Washington's small apartment. She'd been up since 5, way before her alarm clock would ring. Sleep didn't come easy these days, not since Harold had passed. After 52 years of marriage, getting used to an empty bed wasn't something that happened overnight, or over a year for that matter. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table sipping tea from the chipped mug her granddaughter had made in art class years ago. Her fingers, swollen with arthritis, carefully organized the papers spread before her. Today was important. After months of back-and-forth letters and confusing phone calls where people spoke too fast, she finally had an appointment at First National Bank to sort out Harold's pension. "You can do this, Ellie," she whispered to herself, using the nickname only Harold had used. She missed how he'd handled all their finances, his reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose as he balanced their checkbook every Sunday after church. The pension people had somehow messed up after Harold's death. Instead of transferring the monthly payments to her account, they'd stopped them completely. Her Social Security wasn't enough on its own, and her savings were dwindling faster than autumn leaves in a storm. 3 months without that pension. Money meant she'd had to choose between her heart medication and fixing the leaky roof. The roof would have to wait. Eleanor checked her watch, a gift from the school where she'd taught 3rd grade for 37 years. The bus would arrive in 20 minutes. She needed to get moving. Her joints protested as she stood, reminding her that the weather was changing again. Rain was coming. She could feel it in her bones. She dressed carefully in her navy blue, dress with the white collar, her official business outfit, Harold used to call it. She pinned her silver hair neatly at the nape of her neck and applied just a touch of lipstick. Looking respectable mattered when dealing with bank people. Her mother had taught her that. The leather handbag Harold had given her for their 40th anniversary sat ready by the door. Inside was every document she might need. Harold's death certificate, their marriage license, bank statements, Social Security cards, the pension paperwork she'd already filled out twice before, and 3 different forms of ID because young folks, these days, always seemed to need more proof of who she was. Eleanor locked her apartment door, testing the handle twice, another habit she'd picked up since living alone. The elevator in her building had been broken more often than not lately, so she gripped the railing tightly as she made her way down 3 flights of stairs. By the 2nd floor, her knee was throbbing, but she kept going. Eleanor Washington had never been one to give up easily. Outside, the summer heat hit her like a wall. August in the city was brutal, especially for someone her age. She should have brought a hat, but going back up those stairs wasn't an option now. The bus stop was only 2 blocks away, but on days like this, it felt like 20. She passed Mr. Chen sweeping the sidewalk in front of his grocery store. They exchanged waves. He'd been giving her slightly bruised fruit at half price since Harold died, never mentioning it was a discount, just smiling and telling her he had too much inventory. People could be kind in quiet ways. The bus was running late today of all days. Eleanor checked her watch again, anxiety building in her chest. Her appointment was at 10, and it was already 9:15. The bank was downtown, at least a 30-minute ride. Being late wasn't an option. She'd waited 3 weeks for this appointment. When the bus finally rumbled to a stop, it was packed. Eleanor waited as other passengers exited, then climbed aboard slowly, coins ready in her hand. The driver, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes, nodded at her. "Morning, Miss Eleanor. Hot one today, huh?" Eleanor smiled back, grateful to be recognized. "Certainly is, Rita. Bus running behind today?" "Traffic on 5th Avenue, construction again." Rita shook her head. "You heading downtown?" "Got an appointment at the bank. Need to sort out Harold's pension." Rita nodded sympathetically. "You take care in this heat. I'll announce your stop nice and loud." All the seats were taken, so Eleanor held onto the pole, her handbag clutched tightly against her side. A young man with headphones sat right in front of her, pretending not to notice her standing there. Times had changed since she was young. Back then, people gave up their seats without thinking twice. The bus lurched forward, and Eleanor nearly lost her balance. A hand steadied her elbow, a woman in scrubs, probably heading to the hospital for her shift. "Would you like my seat, ma'am?" the woman asked, already standing. "Bless you, honey," Eleanor said, lowering herself gratefully onto the warm seat. The small kindness nearly brought tears to her eyes. Maybe times hadn't changed that much after all. As the bus crawled through traffic, Eleanor mentally rehearsed what she would say at the bank. She'd been preparing for days. "I'm here regarding my late husband's pension transfer. I've submitted the forms twice already. Here are copies of everything, including the confirmation numbers I received." She wouldn't let them brush her off, again with more paperwork or vague promises to look into it. The city rolled by outside the window, changing so fast she hardly recognized it anymore. Glass towers where old brick buildings used to stand. Coffee shops on every corner charging $5 for what she brewed at home for pennies. Young people walking while staring at phones, missing the world around them. At a stoplight, she noticed a billboard for a new movie starring that nice, bald actor her granddaughter liked so much, the one with the deep voice from those car movies. What was his name? Something unusual. It would come to her later, probably in the middle of the night when she couldn't sleep. The bus hit a pothole, jostling everyone. Eleanor held her bag tighter. Inside was every piece of paper that proved who she and Harold had been. 60 years of life together reduced to documents with official stamps. It didn't seem right somehow. First National Bank coming up in 2 blocks. Rita called out, louder than necessary, catching Eleanor's eye in the rearview mirror. Eleanor pressed the stop request button and began the slow process of standing up. The woman in scrubs who had given up her seat was gone now, replaced by a businessman typing furiously on his phone. He didn't look up as Eleanor inched past him. The bank stood tall and imposing at the corner of Main and Walnut, all glass and marble. Nothing like the friendly local branch where Mr. Peabody had known everyone by name when she was young. This place looked more like a spaceship than a bank. Eleanor paused outside, catching her breath and checking her watch. 9:55. She'd made it with 5 minutes to spare despite the late bus. A small victory. Through the revolving door she went, careful not to get caught in its spinning embrace. The air conditioning hit her like winter, raising goosebumps on her arms. She should have brought a cardigan too. The inside was cavernous, all echoing space and shiny floors. Young people in suits walked briskly, carrying coffee cups and important-looking folders. Eleanor felt suddenly very small and very old. A security guard stood near the entrance, looking bored. "Can I help you, ma'am? I have an appointment at 10 o'clock. About my husband's pension." Eleanor straightened her shoulders, trying to look like someone who belonged there. The guard pointed toward a desk with a customer service sign. "Check in over there." Eleanor nodded her thanks and made her way carefully across the slippery marble floor. Her sensible shoes squeaked slightly with each step. The sound seemed to echo, drawing glances from the busy people rushing past. Or maybe they were looking at her because she was obviously out of place in this temple of modern finance. The line at customer service had 4 people ahead of her. Eleanor checked her watch again. 9:58. She'd still make her 10 o'clock. Appointment, but just barely. Her heart fluttered with anxiety. She couldn't afford to reschedule. The next available appointment was probably weeks away, and her rent was due next Friday. As she waited, Eleanor reviewed the paperwork once more, making sure everything was in order. Her fingers trembled slightly as she thumbed through the manila folder. The young woman behind the counter seemed to be moving in slow motion, typing endlessly between each customer. A clock on the wall ticked past 10 o'clock, then 5 past. Eleanor shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other. The folder felt heavier by the minute, and the cool air was seeping into her bones now. But Eleanor Washington had come too far to turn back. Harold's pension was rightfully hers, and today was the day she would set things straight. When she finally reached the front of the line, the young woman barely looked up from her computer. "Next, please." Eleanor took a deep breath and stepped forward. It was time to stand her ground. The young woman behind the counter glanced up at Eleanor, then back at her computer screen. Her name tag read Tiffany. She couldn't have been more than 25, with perfectly manicured nails that clacked against the keyboard. "How can I help you today?" she asked, her voice flat like she'd already said those exact words 100 times since morning. Eleanor cleared her throat. "Good morning. I have an appointment at 10 o'clock regarding my husband's pension. The name is Washington. Eleanor Washington. Tiffany typed something, her eyes never leaving the screen. You're late. Your appointment was at 10 and it's now. She glanced at her watch. 10:12. The bus was running behind, Eleanor explained, trying to keep the worry from her voice. But I'm here now. Tiffany sighed. I'll see if Mr. Reynolds can still take you. She picked up a phone and spoke quietly into it, occasionally glancing at Eleanor as if she were an inconvenience rather than a customer. Finally, she hung up. He's with someone else now. You'll have to wait. How long will that be? Eleanor asked, her hand tightening around the strap of her handbag. I've waited 3 weeks for this appointment. However long it takes, Tiffany replied with a shrug. Take a seat in the waiting area. Someone will call your name. Eleanor wanted to argue but knew it wouldn't help. She nodded and made her way to the seating area, a collection of stiff-looking chairs arranged around a glass coffee table covered in financial magazines. Her knees protested as she lowered herself into a chair. The minutes ticked by slowly. Eleanor watched people come and go, mostly younger folks in business attire who seemed to get immediate attention. A few times she thought she heard her name, only to realize it was just someone talking nearby. The air conditioning was making her bones ache, and she regretted not bringing a sweater. After nearly 45 minutes, a young man in a crisp, blue suit approached the waiting area. Mrs. Washington? He called, looking around. Eleanor raised her hand and struggled to her feet. That's me. The young man, barely older than Tiffany at the front desk, looked her up and down. I'm Tyler. Reynolds, follow me, please. Eleanor followed him through a maze of desks to a small glass cubicle. Unlike the other spaces around them, which had cushioned chairs for clients, this one only had a high stool for her to sit on. Tyler took his place in an ergonomic office chair behind the desk. I understand you're here about a pension, he said, not bothering to look at her as he typed something into his computer. Yes. My husband Harold passed away last year, and his pension payments were supposed to transfer to me. I've filled out the paperwork twice already, but there seems to be a problem. Eleanor began opening her handbag to retrieve the documents. Tyler held up his hand. Before we get to that, I need to see 2 forms of ID and proof of address. Eleanor nodded and pulled out her driver's license, social security card, and a recent utility bill. Tyler took them without a word and began typing again. It says here you were already helped with this issue in May, he said, frowning at his screen. That's right, Eleanor confirmed. A lady named Patricia helped me fill out the transfer forms, but the money never came. Then I came back in June, and someone else, I don't recall his name, said there was a problem with the first form and had me fill out a new one. It's been almost another month and still nothing. Tyler's fingers continued to tap at his keyboard. And your husband's name was Harold Washington? Yes. We were married for 52 years. Eleanor couldn't keep the pride from her voice. 52 years wasn't something many people could claim these days. And do you have his death certificate with you? Eleanor nodded and pulled it from her folder along with the pension information. I brought everything. The pension account number is right there at the top. Tyler barely glanced at the papers. These aren't the right forms. Eleanor blinked. Excuse me? These are the old forms. We updated our pension transfer forms in July. You'll need to fill out the new ones. He swiveled in his chair and pulled a thick packet from a drawer behind him, dropping it on the desk between them. Eleanor stared at the packet, at least 10 pages thick. But I've already filled out forms twice before. I was told the last time that everything was in order. Tyler rolled his eyes, not even trying to hide his impatience. Well, obviously it wasn't, or you wouldn't be here again, would you? His voice was loud enough that several people at nearby desks looked over. Eleanor felt her cheeks grow hot with embarrassment. I don't understand, she said quietly. No one called to tell me there were new forms. I've been waiting for the pension to restart. I'm behind on bills. That's not the bank's responsibility, Mrs. Washington, Tyler said, his tone making it clear he thought she was being difficult on purpose. Financial regulations change. It's up to you to keep up with them. Eleanor felt a lump forming in her throat. But how would I know about new forms if no one told me? Tyler sighed dramatically. Look, do you want to fill out the new forms or not? Because I have other clients waiting. Eleanor looked down at the thick packet. Her hands were already aching from the bus ride, and her reading glasses were at home, because she thought she'd just be dropping off papers, not filling out new ones. Could I take these home and bring them back tomorrow? I don't have my reading glasses with me. Tyler made a noise that sounded like a laugh, though there was no humor in it. If you leave without filling them out, you'll have to make a new appointment, and we're booked solid for the next month. Eleanor felt trapped. She couldn't wait another month. Her medication was already being rationed, and the landlord wasn't the patient type. But how could she fill out forms she could barely see? Do you have a larger print version? She asked hopefully. These old eyes aren't what they used to be. Tyler's laugh was real this time, and it cut through Eleanor like a knife. Larger print? This isn't the library, Mrs. Washington. These are standard legal documents. A few people waiting nearby chuckled. One woman in a business suit whispered something to her companion, and they both smirked in Eleanor's direction. Perhaps I could help her, a deep voice said from behind them. Eleanor turned to see an older gentleman in a security uniform. His name tag read, Frank. This isn't your department, Frank, Tyler said dismissively. I've got this handled. Frank's kind face hardened slightly. Just offering to help a customer, Tyler. That's all of our departments. Tyler turned back to Eleanor, lowering his voice but not his condescension. Look, Mrs. Washington, I'll give you 5 minutes to decide. Either fill out the forms now or make a new appointment for next month. That's the best I can do. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for the packet. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she wasn't sure if it was because she needed her reading glasses or because tears were forming in her eyes. She refused to cry here in front of this boy who probably made more money in a month than she did in a year from her teacher's pension. Could I borrow a pen, please? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Tyler slid a pen across the desk. Start with the highlighted sections on each page. Don't skip anything or it'll just get rejected again. Eleanor squinted at the first page, the tiny print swimming before her eyes. She could barely make out the section Tyler had mentioned. How was she supposed to fill this out correctly when she could hardly read it? A woman at the next desk laughed loudly at something on her phone, then showed it to Tyler. Check this out, she said, not bothering to lower her voice. My grandma sent me another one of those chain letters. Says I need to forward it to 10 people or I'll have bad luck. Can you believe old people still fall for this stuff? Tyler snickered. Tell me about it. They can't figure out technology, but they still want to manage their money themselves. Eleanor pretended not to hear as she struggled with the form, but their words stung. She had taught herself to use email to keep in touch with her grandchildren. She had a Facebook account, even if she rarely posted on it. She wasn't completely lost in this modern world, despite what these young folks thought. As she tried to fill in her name and address on the first line, her arthritic fingers made the pen wobble. The letters came out shaky and uneven. Tyler watched her struggle for a moment, then sighed again. Maybe you should bring someone with you next time. A family member or something? Someone who can help with the paperwork. The suggestion, though perhaps well-intentioned, felt like another blow, as if she were a child who needed supervision. My son lives in Arizona, Eleanor said quietly. My daughter works 2 jobs. I've handled our finances since my husband died. I can do this. She bent closer to the paper, determined to prove him wrong, but the tiny print remained stubbornly blurry. A drop of water fell onto the form, smudging the ink of her half-written name. Eleanor realized with horror that it was a tear. Despite her best efforts, she was crying in the middle of First National Bank. Tyler noticed and shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Look, Mrs. Washington, is everything okay here? A new voice interrupted, deep, gravelly, and somehow familiar. Eleanor quickly wiped her eyes and looked up to see a large, muscular man standing beside her cubicle. He was bald, with kind eyes that were currently fixed on Tyler, with an intensity that made the young banker straighten in his chair. Eleanor recognized him immediately. It was the actor from the billboard she'd seen earlier, the one from those car movies her granddaughter loved, and he was looking at her with concern written all over his face. The bank suddenly seemed quieter, as if someone had turned down the volume on all the background noise. Eleanor blinked away her tears, embarrassed to be caught crying by a stranger, especially one so famous. Tyler's entire demeanor changed. His back straightened, and his annoyed expression transformed into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything's fine, sir. Just helping this customer with some paperwork." The bald man, Vin Diesel, Eleanor now remembered his name, didn't look convinced. He glanced at the papers on the desk, then at Eleanor's trembling hands, and finally, back to Tyler. "Doesn't look fine to me," he said, his deep voice quiet but somehow filling the small cubicle. He turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" Eleanor wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to maintain her dignity and insist everything was fine. Another part, the part that was tired of being dismissed and belittled, wanted to tell this kind stranger exactly how she'd been treated. "I'm having some trouble with the forms," she admitted, her voice steadier than she expected. "My husband passed last year, and his pension payments stopped. I've been trying to get them transferred to my name, but there seems to be a new problem every time I come in." Vin nodded, listening carefully, his eyes never leaving her face. There was something about his attention that made Eleanor feel heard, really heard, for the first time since she'd walked into the bank. "Mind if I sit down?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space beside her cubicle. Before Eleanor could answer, Tyler jumped in. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we're in the middle of a private financial consultation. Perhaps one of our other representatives could help you today." Vin turned his gaze to Tyler, his expression unreadable. "I'm not here for myself. I'd like to help this lady, if she's okay with it." All eyes in the nearby cubicles were on them. Now, Eleanor could hear whispers. "Is that who I think it is? That's definitely him. What's he doing here?" Tyler looked uncertain, clearly torn between following bank protocol and not wanting to offend a celebrity. "Well, sir, we have privacy. Policies that—" "I don't mind if he stays," Eleanor interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. There was something reassuring about this man's presence, something that made her feel less alone in this cold, unwelcoming place. Vin pulled over a chair from an empty desk nearby and sat down beside Eleanor, completely ignoring Tyler's flustered expression. "So, what seems to be the issue with these forms?" he asked her. "They're new forms, apparently. Different from the ones I filled out twice before," Eleanor explained, gesturing to the thick packet. "And I forgot my reading glasses. At home, I can barely make out the print." Vin picked up the forms, flipping through them with a frown. "This is a lot of paperwork, and the print is tiny. Do you have a magnifying glass or large print version?" he asked Tyler. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "We don't typically offer—" "What? About reasonable accommodations?" Vin interrupted, his tone still polite but with an edge that wasn't there before. "I believe that's a legal requirement for financial institutions." Eleanor watched as Tyler's face flushed. He clearly hadn't expected to be challenged, especially not by someone like Vin Diesel. "I'll check with my manager," Tyler muttered, standing up quickly and walking away from the cubicle. When he was gone, Vin turned to Eleanor with a gentle smile. "I'm Vincent, by the way. Friends call me Vin." He extended his hand. Eleanor took it, noticing how carefully he shook her fragile fingers. "Eleanor Washington. Everyone calls me Eleanor." She paused, then added with a small smile. "Except my late husband. He called me Ellie." "It's nice to meet you, Eleanor," Vin said. "I couldn't help overhearing some of what was happening. Sounded like you were getting the runaround." Eleanor sighed. "Third time I've been here about the same issue. Each time they tell me something different. First they said the paperwork was processed, then they said it was the wrong form. Now it's a new form entirely." She looked down at her handbag, where the corner of a faded photograph peeked out. "My husband Harold handled all this stuff when he was alive. He was good with numbers, with paperwork. I'm still learning." Vin nodded, his eyes kind. "My grandmother went through something similar after my grandfather passed. These things aren't made easy for folks who need them most." Before Eleanor could respond, a flurry of activity caught her attention. Tyler was returning, but he wasn't alone. A woman in an expensive-looking suit walked beside him, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. Behind them was Frank, the security guard who had offered to help earlier. "Mr. Diesel," the woman said as she approached, her hand already extended. "I'm Diane Powell, the branch manager. It's an honor to have you visit our bank today. Is there anything we can do to make your visit more comfortable?" Vin stood to shake her hand but gestured immediately to Eleanor. "I'm not here as a customer. I'm concerned about how Mrs. Washington is being treated. She's been trying to sort out her late husband's pension for months, and it seems like she's getting nowhere." Diane's professional smile faltered slightly as she turned to look at Eleanor, as if noticing her for the first time. "Mrs. Washington, I apologize if there's been any confusion with your accounts. We pride ourselves on customer service at First National." Eleanor couldn't help but notice how different Diane's tone was compared to Tyler's. The manager was all smiles and politeness now that a celebrity was involved. "The main issue right now," Vin continued, "is that Mrs. Washington needs assistance with these forms. The print is too small for her to read without her glasses, and she says she's already filled out similar forms twice before." Diane shot a look at Tyler, who suddenly seemed very interested in his shoes. "I see. Well, we certainly want to help Mrs. Washington resolve this matter today." She turned to Frank. "Could you please bring a magnifying glass from the supply room, and perhaps we should move to my office where it's more comfortable." Frank nodded and hurried off, seeming pleased that Eleanor was finally getting proper attention. "That's very kind," Eleanor said, gathering her things. "But I don't want to be a bother." "No bother at all," Diane insisted, her smile now firmly back in place. "We want all our customers to feel valued." Vin gave Eleanor a small wink that the others couldn't see. She felt a smile tugging at her lips, the first real one since she'd entered the bank. It was amazing how quickly things could change when someone important took an interest. As they walked toward Diane's office, Eleanor was aware of the stares following them. Bank employees and customers alike were watching with undisguised curiosity. A few people had their phones out, probably taking pictures or videos. Eleanor felt self-conscious in her simple navy dress, walking alongside a movie star and the bank manager. Diane's office was a stark contrast to the cubicle where Eleanor had been sitting. Plush chairs, a large mahogany desk, and family photos in silver frames created a warm, welcoming atmosphere that the rest of the bank lacked. "Please have a seat," Diane said, gesturing to the comfortable chairs. "Can I offer either of you coffee? Water?" "Water would be nice," Eleanor said, suddenly aware of how dry her throat was. "Same for me," Vin added, taking the seat next to Eleanor. As Diane stepped out to get their drinks, Vin leaned over to Eleanor. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Eleanor nodded. "Better now. Thank you for stepping in. I don't think they would have taken me seriously otherwise." "Sometimes people need a reminder to do the right thing," Vin replied. "My mom raised me to respect my elders, taught me that wisdom doesn't come from fancy degrees or big job titles. It comes from life experience." Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude toward this man, this stranger who had stepped into her day and changed its course. "Your mother raised you right." Diane returned with the water, followed by Frank with a magnifying glass and a young woman carrying a laptop. "This is Lisa from our customer service department," Diane explained. "She's going to help us access your account information directly so we can resolve this issue without any more forms." Lisa smiled at Eleanor, a genuine smile, not the forced kind Tyler had given. "Mrs. Washington, if you don't mind, I'd like to pull up your information and see exactly what's happened with your husband's pension." For the next 20 minutes, Lisa worked diligently, asking Eleanor questions about her account, the pension company, and the previous visits to the bank. Vin stayed quietly by Eleanor's side, occasionally asking a clarifying question, but mostly just providing moral support with his presence. "I think I see the problem," Lisa finally said, turning the laptop so Eleanor and Vin could see the screen. "The pension company requires a bank verification letter that wasn't included with your previous submissions. That's likely why they haven't processed the transfer yet. But nobody told me about a verification letter, Eleanor said, frustration creeping back into her voice. They should have, Diane interjected, giving Lisa a meaningful look. We'll take care of that right now, and I'll personally call the pension company to make sure everything gets processed correctly this time. Eleanor felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. After months of worry and confusion, it seemed like her problem might actually be solved today. And how long will it take for Mrs. Washington to receive her first payment? Vin asked, his deep voice reminding everyone that he was still very much involved in the situation. Diane straightened in her chair. We'll request expedited processing. Given the delay she's already experienced, I think we can have this resolved within the week. She turned to Eleanor. And Mrs. Washington, we'd like to offer you a temporary advance on the expected funds to help with any immediate expenses until the pension payments begin. Eleanor's eyes widened. No one had mentioned anything about an advance during her previous visits. You can do that? In special circumstances, yes, Diane said with a nod. I think this qualifies as a special circumstance. Frank, who had been standing quietly by the door, caught Eleanor's eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up. They both knew that the special circumstance was sitting right next to her in a plain black t-shirt, his famous face now the reason doors were suddenly opening. As Lisa printed out the necessary documents and Diane made a call to the pension company, Eleanor turned to Vin. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. You didn't have to get involved in an old woman's problems. Vin shook his head. No thanks needed. Just paying forward what others have done for me. Besides, he added with a smile that transformed his serious face, my grandmother would come back to haunt me if I walked past someone who needed help. Eleanor laughed. A genuine laugh that made her feel years younger. Well, I hope she knows. She raised a good man. I think she does, Vin replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I think she does. The next hour passed in a blur for Eleanor. Papers were signed, phone calls were made, and promises were kept. Diane, the branch manager, seemed determined to make up for Eleanor's previous treatment, hovering nearby and offering assistance at every turn. Lisa worked efficiently on the computer, occasionally explaining something to Eleanor in clear, simple terms, not the condescending way Tyler had spoken to her. Through it all, Vin remained by her side, his presence a steady anchor in the whirlwind of activity. He declined several phone calls, silencing his phone after the third one vibrated in his pocket. Don't you need to get that? Eleanor asked, concerned that she was keeping him from important business. Vin shook his head. Just my assistant wondering where I am. I was only supposed to stop by the bank for 20 minutes. He smiled. This is more important. Eleanor felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee Diane had eventually brought her. It had been a long time since anyone had made her feel important. I think we're all set, Mrs. Washington, Lisa finally said, printing one last document and adding it to the folder she'd prepared. Your pension transfer has been submitted with expedited processing. Diane has spoken directly with the pension manager, and they've confirmed receipt of all the necessary documentation. And here's the temporary advance we discussed, Diane added, sliding an envelope across the desk. It's equivalent to 2 months of your expected pension payments. You don't need to pay it back. It's the bank's way of apologizing for the inconvenience. Eleanor stared at the envelope, stunned. That's very generous. It's what we should have done from the beginning, Diane said with a quick glance at Vin. Eleanor wasn't fooled. She knew exactly why the bank was suddenly being so accommodating, but she wasn't about to turn down help she desperately needed. We've also set up text alerts for your account, Lisa explained. You'll get a message on your phone whenever there's a deposit or if your balance gets low. I'm not very good with text messages, Eleanor admitted. My granddaughter showed me once, but I forget sometimes. I can help with that, Frank spoke up from his position by the door. My mother had the same issue. If you'd like, I could show you how to set up the alerts so they're easier to see. Maybe during your lunch break sometime? Eleanor smiled at the security guard. That would be very kind, Frank. Thank you. As the meeting wound down, Diane stood and extended her hand to Eleanor. Again, Mrs. Washington, I sincerely apologize for any difficulties you've experienced. From now on, you'll have my direct line for any questions or concerns. She handed Eleanor a business card with a number, written on the back. That's my cell phone. Please don't hesitate to use it. Eleanor took the card, still somewhat dazed by the complete reversal in how she was being treated. She glanced at Vin, who gave her an encouraging nod. Thank you, Miss Powell, Eleanor said, using the formal name that matched how Diane had addressed her. I appreciate your help today. As they prepared to leave Diane's office, Eleanor carefully placed all her new documents in her handbag. The weight of worry that had been crushing her for months felt lighter now. She would be able to pay her rent on time. She could pick up her full prescription. Maybe she could even fix that leaky roof before the fall rains came. Mrs. Washington, Lisa said, just as they were about to leave, would you like me to walk you to the bus stop? It's gotten quite hot outside. Eleanor was touched by the offer but shook her head. Thank you, dear, but I'll be fine. The bus doesn't come for another 30 minutes anyway. Actually, Vin said, I was hoping I could give you a ride home, Mrs. Washington. My car's just around the corner and it would be my pleasure. Eleanor hesitated. She'd been raised not to accept rides from strangers, but then again, Vin Diesel hardly seemed like a stranger anymore. Still, she didn't want to impose. Oh, I couldn't ask you to go out of your way. You've already done so much. I insist, Vin said with a gentle smile. Besides, I'd enjoy the conversation. How could she say no to that? Eleanor nodded. Well, if you're sure it's no trouble. They said their goodbyes to the bank staff. Frank promised to call her next week about the phone alerts. Diane repeated her apologies. Even Tyler, who had been summoned back to the manager's office briefly, offered a mumbled sorry for the inconvenience that didn't sound entirely sincere, but was still better than his earlier attitude. As they walked through the bank's main floor, toward the exit, Eleanor noticed how people's eyes followed them. Some were openly staring, while others pretended to be busy with their phones or paperwork, but kept stealing glances. A few whispered behind their hands. Eleanor wondered what. They saw a famous actor being kind to an old womb. Anne, or something more surprising. Outside, the heat hit them like a wall after the cool interior of the bank. Eleanor squinted against the bright sunlight, wishing again that she'd brought a hat. My car's this way, Vin said, gently guiding her, with a light touch to her elbow. Just around the corner. Eleanor expected some flashy sports car, the kind movie stars drove in films, but was surprised when Vin led her to a sleek but understated black SUV parked in a loading zone. Won't you get a ticket? She asked, pointing to the no parking sign. Vin chuckled. Probably. Small price to pay for finding a spot downtown. He opened the passenger door for her, even offering his hand to help her step up into the vehicle. The interior was cool and smelled of leather and something faintly spicy. Cologne, perhaps. Eleanor settled into the seat, marveling at how comfortable it was compared to the hard plastic seats on the bus. Once Vin was behind the wheel, he turned to her. Where to, Mrs. Washington? Parkview Apartments on Oak Street, she replied. But, really, if it's out of your way, it's not, he assured her, pulling smoothly into traffic. I'm staying at a hotel not far from there while we finish shooting. You're making a movie here? Eleanor asked, interested despite herself. She'd never known much about the film industry. Just finishing up some scenes, Vin explained. We've been filming all over the city for the past few weeks. Today was supposed to be my morning off before afternoon shoots. Eleanor felt a pang of guilt. And you spent it helping an old woman at the bank. I'm sorry to have taken up your free time. Vin shook his head firmly. Don't be sorry. This was time well spent. He glanced at her, then back at the road. To be honest, I needed a break from the movie bubble. It's easy to lose perspective when you're surrounded by the same people day in and day out, all focused on the same project. You forget what real life is like. They drove in comfortable silence for a few blocks. Eleanor watched the city pass by, noticing how different it looked from this vantage point compared to the bus. The SUV's windows were tinted slightly, making the harsh sunlight more bearable. May I ask you something, Mrs. Washington? Vin said. Eventually. Of course, and please call me Eleanor. Eleanor, he repeated with a smile. I was wondering, when that young man at the bank was being disrespectful to you, why didn't you ask to speak to a manager right away? You didn't deserve to be treated that way. Eleanor considered the question, looking down at her weathered hands folded in her. Hi. When you get to be my age, you get used to being invisible, she said finally. People look past you, or they speak to you like you're a child. After a while, you start to expect it. You stop fighting it. She sighed, watching a group of young people cross the street in front of them, all staring at their phones. My generation was taught not to make waves, especially women like me. We were raised to be polite, to not cause trouble. Sometimes that's hard to unlearn, even when you know you're in the right. Vin nodded thoughtfully. My mother was the same way, always putting others first even when they didn't deserve it. But she was also the strongest person I've ever known. She raised you well, Eleanor observed. Not many young folks would have done what you did today. Vin laughed. I'm not that young anymore, pushing 50 now. That's still young from where I'm sitting, Eleanor said with a smile. When you've seen 78 birthdays, 50 looks like a spring chicken. They turned onto Oak Street and Eleanor pointed out her apartment building, a faded brick structure that had been grand once, perhaps in the 1960s, but now showed its age in peeling paint and cracked concrete steps. Vin pulled up to the curb and put the car in park. Can I help you upstairs with your things? Eleanor shook her head. No need. The elevator's working this week, thank goodness. And I don't have much to carry. Still, Vin insisted on walking her to the building's entrance. As they approached the steps, Eleanor noticed Mrs. Gonzalez from apartment 3B watering the small patch of flowers she maintained by the entrance. The older woman's eyes widened when she saw who was accompanying Eleanor. Buenos dias, Mrs. Gonzalez, Eleanor called, enjoying the look of shock on her neighbor's face. It wasn't every day someone like Vin Diesel showed up at Parkview Apartments. Buenos dias, Eleanor, Mrs. Gonzalez replied, her eyes never leaving Vin. Everything okay? Better than okay, Eleanor assured her. This kind gentleman helped me sort out Harold's pension today. The bank finally got it right. Mrs. Gonzalez nodded, still staring. That's wonderful. At the entrance, Eleanor turned to Vin. I don't know how to thank you properly. You've changed everything for me today. No thanks needed, Vin said. But I do have a favor to ask. Anything, Eleanor replied without hesitation. Would it be all right if I checked in on you next week? Maybe bring you lunch? I'd like to make sure the bank followed through on their promises. Eleanor was touched by the offer. You don't need to do that. I'm sure you're very busy with your movie. I am, Vin acknowledged. But I'd like to, if that's okay with you. Eleanor thought about her empty apartment, the quiet days that stretched before her. The idea of having someone to look forward to was more appealing than she wanted to admit. I'd like that very much, she said finally. I make a mean apple pie. If you're bringing lunch, the least I can do is provide dessert. Vin's face lit up with a genuine smile. It's a deal. He pulled out his phone. Can I get your number? I'll call before I come by. They exchanged contact information, and then Vin surprised Eleanor by giving her a gentle hug goodbye. Take care of yourself, Eleanor. I'll see you soon. As she watched him walk back to his car, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense that tomorrow might be better than today. That sometimes, when you least expect it, the world can still surprise you in wonderful ways. With a lighter heart and a straightened spine, Eleanor Washington walked into her apartment building, already planning which apples would make the perfect pie. 3 days after the bank incident, Eleanor received a text message. It took her several minutes to find her reading glasses and figure out how to open it. The message was from Vin. Just checking in. How are you doing? Did the bank follow through? Eleanor smiled at her phone. She'd told her daughter Amy about meeting Vin Diesel, but Amy hadn't believed her. Mom, why would a movie star help you at the bank? she'd asked with that patient tone she used when she thought Eleanor was confused about something. Eleanor hadn't pushed the issue. Some things were better kept as private treasures. With careful concentration, Eleanor typed back, "Yes, pension deposit came through yesterday. Thank you for asking." She hit send and set the phone down, not expecting an immediate response. Famous. People were busy people after all. To her surprise, the phone buzzed less than a minute later. "Great news. Still on for lunch next week. Tuesday work for you?" Eleanor's heart lifted. He remembered. She replied, "Tuesday is perfect. Don't forget I'm making apple pie." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," came the swift response. The weekend passed in a flurry of activity Eleanor hadn't experienced in months. She cleaned her apartment from top to bottom, dusting Harold's photographs and rearranging the living room furniture to make it more welcoming. On Monday, she went to the grocery store and carefully selected the ripest apples, along with a fresh bag of flour and cinnamon sticks. By Tuesday morning, her apartment smelled of baked apples and cinnamon. Eleanor had woken at 5, unable to sleep with the anticipation of her visitor. The pie had turned out beautifully, golden brown with a lattice top, just the way Harold had liked it. At 11:30, her phone rang. It was Vin. "Good morning. Eleanor?" His deep voice came through the speaker. "I'm running about 20 minutes late. Is that okay?" "Of course, dear," Eleanor replied, secretly pleased to have a little more time to get ready. "The pie's just cooling anyway." "Sounds amazing," Vin said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm bringing sandwiches from this little deli I found. Hope you like pastrami." "Love it," Eleanor said. Harold used to bring home pastrami sandwiches from the Jewish deli downtown on special occasions. The thought brought a bittersweet pang, but not the sharp grief that used to accompany memories of her husband. Progress, she supposed. After hanging up, Eleanor changed her dress twice before settling on a light blue one that her granddaughter had once said brought out her eyes. She pinned her silver hair up neatly and even added a touch of the lipstick she saved for church Sundays. At exactly 12:20, there was a knock at her door. Eleanor took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and went to answer it. Vin stood in the hallway, dressed simply in jeans and a gray t-shirt that did nothing to hide his muscular build. He carried a large paper bag that smelled deliciously of deli meats and pickles. But what surprised Eleanor was that he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with warm brown skin and braided hair pulled back in a ponytail. She carried a bouquet of yellow daisies. "Hope you don't mind," Vin said, noticing Eleanor's surprised expression. "This is Zoe, my niece. She's working as a production assistant on the film, and when I told her about meeting you, she wanted to come along. If that's not okay." "It's absolutely okay," Eleanor interrupted, genuinely pleased. She opened the door wider. "Please, both of you, come in. I'm Eleanor." Zoe stepped forward with a bright smile, offering the flowers. "These are for you, Mrs. Washington. Uncle Vin told me how you stood your ground at the bank. I'm studying business administration, and we just had a whole seminar on how financial institutions often fail older customers. Your story really resonated with me." Eleanor accepted the flowers, touched by the thoughtfulness. "These are beautiful, thank you. And please call me Eleanor." She led them into her small living room, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the worn furniture and outdated decor. But if Vin or Zoe noticed, they gave no sign. Instead, Vin looked around appreciatively. "This is a real home," he said, his eyes landing on the wall of family photographs. "You can feel the love in this place." Eleanor beamed at the compliment. 52 years of memories in these walls," she said. "Please sit down. I'll put these lovely flowers in water and grab some plates for our lunch." "Let me help," Zoe offered, following Eleanor to the tiny kitchen. As Eleanor found a vase for the daisies, Zoe unpacked the deli bag, revealing enormous sandwiches, a container of potato salad, and 3 bottles of craft root beer. "Uncle Vin said you had a sweet tooth," she explained with a smile. In the living room, Eleanor noticed Vin had stopped in front of the largest photograph, her and Harold on their 50th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. "That's my Harold," she said, setting down the plates on the coffee table. Taken 2 years before he passed. Vin studied the photo. He looks like a good man. Strong eyes. The best man I ever knew. Eleanor agreed. Not perfect, mind you. Stubborn as a mule and couldn't cook to save his life. But he was kind when it counted, like someone else I recently met. She gave Vin a meaningful look. They settled in to eat, the conversation flowing easily. Zoe asked about Eleanor's teaching career, genuinely interested in her stories about the changes she'd seen in education over 4 decades. Vin talked about growing up in New York, his voice softening when he mentioned his mother. She raised, "Us alone after my father died," he explained. "Worked 2 jobs sometimes, never complained." "Strong women do what needs doing," Eleanor said simply, thinking of her own mother who had kept the family going during the Depression. "That they do," Vin agreed, raising his root beer bottle in a toast to Eleanor. After they'd eaten their fill of sandwiches, Eleanor served the apple pie, still slightly warm. Vin closed his eyes at the first bite, making a sound of appreciation that made Eleanor laugh. "This is incredible," he said. "Best pie I've had in years." "Family recipe," Eleanor said proudly. "My grandmother taught my mother, who taught me. I taught my daughter, though she uses one of those pre-made crusts." She shook her head in mock disappointment. Zoe took a second helping. "Would you teach me? I've always wanted to learn to bake, but my mom was more of a takeout person." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "You want me to teach you to make pie?" "If you wouldn't mind," Zoe said. "We're in town for another 3 weeks. Maybe I could come by sometime?" Before Eleanor could answer, her phone rang, an unusual occurrence. On a weekday, she excused herself and answered it. "Mrs. Washington? This is Diane Powell from First National Bank." Eleanor raised her eyebrows at Vin. "Yes, Ms. Powell. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling to follow up on your pension situation. The funds transferred successfully, correct?" "They did, thank you," Eleanor confirmed. "Excellent. I also wanted to let you know about a new program we're launching at the bank. It's a financial literacy workshop specifically designed for seniors. We're looking for community advisors to help us shape the curriculum, ensure it addresses real needs. Given your recent experience, I thought you might be interested in participating. It's a paid position, of course." Eleanor nearly dropped the phone. "You want me to be an advisor for the bank?" "Yes," Diane said. "Your perspective would be invaluable. Many of our older customers face similar challenges with changing technology and financial systems. Having someone who understands those challenges would help us serve them better." Eleanor thought about all the other seniors in her building who struggled with ATMs and online banking. About Mrs. Gonzalez, who still paid her bills in person because she didn't trust the mail or the internet. About her friend Walter, who had been scammed twice by emails claiming to be from his bank. "I'd like that very much," Eleanor said finally. "When would you need me to start?" After arranging to meet Diane later that week and hanging up, Eleanor turned to find Vin and Zoe watching her with matching grins. "What?" she asked. "You seem surprised that they'd want your help," Vin observed. Eleanor shrugged. "I'm just an old retired teacher. What do I know about banking?" "You know what it's like to be on the receiving end of poor service," Zoe pointed out. "That's valuable insight. And you're articulate, thoughtful, and won't let them get away with superficial solutions," Vin added. "They're lucky to have you." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "Well, we'll see how it goes. It would be nice to have something useful to do again. Teaching was never just a job for me. It was a calling. I've missed that purpose since retiring." As the afternoon wore on, plans were made. Zoe would come over the following weekend for a pie-making lesson. Vin promised to attend. Eleanor's first advisory meeting at the bank if his filming schedule allowed. Eleanor found herself writing down dates in the calendar that had hung empty on her wall for months. When they finally prepared to leave, Eleanor walked them to the door, suddenly reluctant to see them go. The apartment would seem so quiet after their visit. "Thank you for a wonderful lunch," she said. "And for everything else. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed company so much." Zoe surprised her with a warm hug. "Thank you for the amazing pie. I'll see you Saturday at 2. Vin hung back after Zoe stepped into the hallway. Something occurred to me, he said. The premiere for this film will be in Los Angeles in about 2 months. Would you consider being my guest? All expenses paid, of course. I think you'd enjoy seeing how the whole movie business works. Eleanor stared at him, speechless for a moment. Me? At a Hollywood premiere? Vin smiled. Why not? You could meet the rest of the cast, maybe visit for a week, see the sights. I have a guest house you could stay in? I don't know what to say, Eleanor stammered. Say yes, Vin encouraged. Life's too short to say no to adventures. Eleanor thought about Harold, who had always wanted to see California, about how he would have urged her to go, to live fully even without him. She thought about how just a week ago her biggest concern had been making it to a bank appointment on time, how small her world had become since losing him. Yes, she said finally, her voice firm. I would love to go. Vin's face broke into a wide grin. That's what I was hoping you'd say. He leaned down and kissed her cheek. See you soon, Eleanor Washington. As she closed the door behind him, Eleanor caught a glimpse of herself in the hall mirror. She looked different somehow, taller perhaps, more present. The woman in the reflection was someone with plans, with a future stretching before her. Well, Harold, she said softly to the empty apartment. Looks like I'm not quite finished yet. And somewhere she was sure he was smiling.